still hear his voice sometimes. Soft, like a whisper, but wrong. It's not the voice of the boy I knew. It's something else. Something that shouldn't be. Let me start from the beginning. My name is Ada. I'm 16 years old, and I live in a small village in Nigeria. Life here is simple, but it's not easy. We work hard, farming, fetching water, cooking over open fires. But we have each other, or at least, we used to. My younger brother, Emeka, was my best friend. He was only 10 years old, but he had more energy than anyone I knew. He was always running, laughing, getting into trouble. He was the kind of kid who made you forget how hard life could be, until he got sick. It started with a fever. One day, Emeka came home from playing in the forest and said he didn't feel well. His forehead was burning, and his skin was slick with sweat. My mother gave him herbs and told him to rest, but the fever didn't go away. It got worse. Emeka stopped eating. He stopped talking. He just lay in bed, staring at the ceiling with glassy eyes. His skin turned pale, almost gray, and his breath smelled strange, like rotting leaves. My parents called the village healer, an old woman named Mama Neka. Mama Neka came with her bag of herbs and roots. She burned sage, chanted prayers, and even sacrificed a chicken to the spirits. But nothing worked. Emeka just got worse. His eyes started to sink into his head, and his body became so thin you could see his bones. One night, Emeka stopped breathing. My mother screamed. My father rushed to Emeka's side and shook him, but he didn't wake up. I stood in the corner, frozen, as my parents cried over his lifeless body. Emeka was gone. We buried Emeka the next morning. The whole village came to the funeral. They sang songs and said prayers, but it didn't feel real. Emeka was just a kid. He wasn't supposed to die. We wrapped his body in white cloth and carried him to the burial ground at the edge of the forest. The elders dug a shallow grave and placed him inside. My mother wailed as they covered him with dirt. My father stood silently, his face like stone. I just stared at the fresh mound of earth, trying to understand how my little brother could be gone. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Emeka, his laugh, his smile, the way he used to chase me around the village. I missed him, so much it hurt. But deep down, I felt something else too. Something I couldn't explain. A sense of unease, like something was wrong. 3 days later, I found out I was right. It was late at night. I was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, when I heard a noise outside. It was soft at first, like scratching on the door. I thought it was a dog or maybe the wind, but then I heard it again, louder this time. Ada. I froze. That voice. It was Emeka's, but it wasn't. It sounded like him, but it was wrong. Too low, too rough, like someone was trying to imitate him. Ada, let me in. My heart pounded. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't move. I just lay there, staring at the door as the scratching grew louder. Then I heard my father's voice. Who's there? The scratching stopped. There was silence for a moment, and then the door creaked open. I sat up in bed, my heart racing, as my father stepped outside with his machete. And there he was, Emeka. He was standing in the moonlight, his skin pale and his eyes black. His clothes were dirty, his feet bare, and his arms hung limp at his sides. He didn't move. He didn't speak. He just stood there, staring at us with those empty eyes. My mother screamed and ran to him. She hugged him, crying, but he didn't hug her back. He just stood there, stiff and unmoving, like a doll. That's when I noticed his shadow. It didn't move with him. It stayed still, like it was stuck to the ground. My father grabbed Emeka's arm and pulled him inside. What's wrong with him? He asked, his voice shaking. asking, but no one had an answer. Emeka just sat on the floor, staring at the wall, as my parents tried to talk to him. He didn't respond. He didn't even blink. That night, I had my first nightmare. I dreamed of Emeka standing at the foot of my bed, his black eyes staring into mine. He didn't speak. He didn't move. He just watched. When I woke up, I found scratches on my arms. Deep, like claws had dug into my skin. I screamed, and my parents came running. They saw the scratches and the look on my face. They knew something was wrong, but they didn't know how wrong it really was. The morning after Emeka came back, the village was buzzing. Word spread fast. People whispered as they passed our hut, their eyes wide with fear and curiosity. Some said it was a miracle. Others said it was a curse. But no one knew what to do. Emeka sat in the corner of our hut, staring at the wall. He hadn't moved since last night. My mother tried to feed him, but he didn't eat. She tried to talk to him, but he didn't answer. He just sat there, his black eyes unblinking, his body stiff and unnatural. My father called the village elders. They came quickly, their faces grim. Baba Yemi, the oldest and wisest of them, knelt in front of Emeka and studied him closely. He waved a hand in front of Emeka's face, but Emeka didn't react. He didn't even seem to notice. "This is not your son," Baba Yemi said finally, his voice low and serious. "This is a spirit wearing his skin." My mother gasped and covered her mouth. "No," she said, shaking her head. "No, it's him. It's Emeka. He's just sick. He needs time to heal." But Baba Yemi shook his head. "If we don't act, this thing will destroy us all." The other elders nodded in agreement. They whispered among themselves, their voices tense and urgent. I didn't understand everything they said, but I caught a few words. Evil, curse, danger. My father looked torn. He glanced at Emeka, then at my mother, then at the elders. "What do we do?" he asked. Baba Yemi stood up. "We must perform a cleansing ritual. We must drive the spirit out." My mother started to cry. "No, you can't hurt him. He's my son." But the elders didn't listen. They left to prepare for the ritual, leaving us alone with Emeka. My mother sat beside him, stroking his hair and whispering to him. But Emeka didn't respond. He just stared at the wall, his face blank and empty. That night, the nightmare started again. I dreamed of Emeka standing at the foot of my bed, his black eyes staring into mine. He didn't speak. He didn't move. He just watched. When I woke up, my arms were covered in scratches, deep, angry marks that hadn't been there before. I screamed, and my parents came running. They saw the scratches and the look on my face. They knew something was wrong. "It's him," I said, my voice shaking. "It's Emeka. He's doing this." My father's face darkened. He grabbed his machete and went to Emeka's corner, but Emeka wasn't there. The space where he'd been sitting was empty. "Where is he?" my father demanded, his voice tight with fear. We searched the hut, but Emeka was gone. The door was still closed, the window shut. There was no way he could have left, but he wasn't there. Then we heard it, a soft, scraping sound outside. My father opened the door, and there he was. Emeka was standing in the moonlight, his black eyes gleaming. He was holding something in his hands. It took me a moment to realize what it was. A chicken. One of our chickens. Its neck was twisted at an unnatural angle, and its feathers were matted with blood. Emeka dropped it at our feet and smiled. A wide, unnatural smile that made my stomach turn. My father raised his machete, but Emeka didn't flinch. He just stood there, staring at us with those empty eyes. "Leave us alone," my father said, his voice trembling. "You're not my son." Emeka tilted his head, like he was trying to understand. Then he turned and walked away. disappearing into the shadows. We didn't sleep that night. We sat in the hut, waiting for the elders to come. When they finally arrived at dawn, they brought ropes and fire. They said it was the only way to stop him.